episode of the King's Information Network podcast, reading Nothing Is Ever Easy, and we are all the way up to chapter 25, so solidly getting into the second half of the book. So let's get at it. Chapter 25. The set of footsteps that interrupted us next belonged to the young woman who delivered our meals. She silently set the tray down and retrieved our morning tray, replacing it with the new full one. I watched her and smiled kindly when I caught her eye. She quickly looked away. "Thank you," Jay said brightly as I pulled the tray in further to distribute it. She nodded and hurried away. "And they're holding hands again," Dave told me in a very effective stage whisper, staring pointedly at Stella and Jay. I shrugged, fighting a smile. Some people don't learn quickly. Stella mostly looked amused, rolling her eyes, and went to let go, but Jay deliberately made eye contact with Dave and then me. "The food isn't going anywhere," he said almost triumphantly, like he was winning a point. "It will if you wait long enough. Dave and I are hungry, right, kid?" He nodded solemnly, eyes alight with mischief. "You wouldn't," Jay protested. "I can't speak for Dave, but I absolutely would. There's no point in letting food go to waste. Aren't you the one always advocating for eating even when it's boring?" "Yes, because food is important, but that's not what I meant." Stella snorted and gently extracted her hand, patting his arm. "We know what you meant." "Do we?" I asked. Dave shook his head. Jay threw a spoon at me, which I easily ducked. "Jez, can we distract them with the story?" Dave asked hopefully. I winked at him. "It's worth a shot. It'll also distract Jay from warming his spoon." Dave snickered as Jay realized he'd have to eat with his hands. I grinned and picked the story up. The next month passed in a hectic mess of moving and transferring people. Mick, Reardon, and Beau left for days at a time. To Rye's sadness, it was established that the small school for the kids and teens would remain at Cavern Hall proper, which meant Iris would stay too. Everyone made multiple trips to the new location, which existed above ground, but in a well-hidden area at the base of the mountains west of the current Cavern Hall. By the end of the month, they had a third of their forces moved. Everyone was exhausted. The logistics of it all, while keeping it quiet, hidden, and not creating any well-worn trails, had not been easy. The morning after the move was finally completed, the entire group lounged in Beau's office, barely talking, doing no work, and mostly half asleep. Reardon and Duncan were running hand-to-hand combat practice that none had felt like attending, and everyone else was busy with their everyday tasks. "I'm bored," Beau said. Jessie started as she looked up. "Wait, Beau?" Jay gave her his best put-out look. "It's not always me." "Usually is," she shot back. "I need to do something," Beau continued. "Do not even think about touching the paperwork," Jez told him. "Why don't you, Mick, and Jay go do some sort of male bonding and leave us to our quiet time?" Rye said. "I'm not sure I like the sound of this," Mick replied. "What were you thinking?" "Fishing," Jay said. "I used to fish all the time at the river just outside my house." "Where are we going to go fishing? The stream we use for water can't possibly be big enough to have any fish of any size," Beau said. "There's a stream just east of here. Dunk went fishing there a couple times this summer and caught, trout, maybe?" Rye said and shrugged. "Fish are not something I have very much knowledge about." "It's chilly today." "But sunny, and sunshine is good for you," Jay said. "Don't push me." "I wouldn't dream of it." The others unilaterally favored him with a skeptical look. He grinned sheepishly. "Let's do it." "Sounds like it could be fun," Beau said, nodding to himself. "And we could use a full day off. Do we have fishing supplies?" "Yeah, somewhere. We can ask Duncan." Jay stood. "Follow me." Then he bounded out of the room. Mick heaved a sigh. "God's breath. What have we gotten ourselves into?" "Oh, come on, Mick," Beau said with a laugh. "I'm sure it'll end up being fun. Or we can always just push him in. That would shut him up." "You wouldn't," Jessie said, but she was obviously squashing a smile. "Are you sure of that?" Jez poked him in the side. "Yeah, you like Jay too much, even if you won't admit it." "I'd do it," Mick said as he walked out. "Now that I don't necessarily doubt," Rye said. It took the trio about a half an hour to track down the fishing poles, pack a lunch, and collect some scraps to use as bait. "Okay, we've got everything," Jay said, peering into the bag and then rustling it. "Why do we have a book?" "So I can throw it at you when you annoy me," Mick said. Jay frowned. "Can we leave it home then?" "No, I need to read it." "Can we at least promise not to throw it at me?" he asked, smartly choosing not to pout. Mick swiped it from Jay's hands and tucked it under his arm. "No." Beau interrupted before they could escalate the argument. "Does that mean we're ready?" Jay nodded. "Can we go then?" He nodded again. "Well, then let's. And how about I cook you dinner after we get home? Then I won't have that little obligation hanging over my head." Jay beamed and did a little dance as he headed for the door. "That'll be fun," he threw over his shoulder. "I'm so glad Jay's definitions of words never match up with the rest of the world," Beau muttered to Mick. Mick grinned and headed out. Jay hummed merrily, doing a little jig a few feet in front of them on their walk. Beau was relieved when they finally reached the stream. "Whose great idea was this again?" he asked Mick, but Jay answered. "Rise, isn't she smart?" "Brilliant," Mick said dryly. We should come back when the stream's frozen, Jay said as he settled on the bank and pulled out the bait. He hummed some more as he got his pole ready and dropped it in the deep pool. Why, then it would be really cold, Mick said. Yeah, but ice fishing is a blast, despite the cold. He passed the bait bucket down to them. Jay leaned back, holding his pole in one hand. Beau dropped his line in the water and stared at it. After 5 minutes, he glanced at the other two. Mick held his pole in one hand and his book open with the other. Is this it? Is what it? We just sit here like this all day. Yes, unless you catch something. Mick snorted. It continually surprises me, but patience is not one of your strong suits, he said. I can be plenty patient when I want to be. I don't like wasting time, Beau retorted. We could have a conversation. With you? The other two asked simultaneously, with more than a little skepticism. That was low, even for you two, Jay whined. Great minds think alike, Mick told him, giving Beau a high five. Jay sighed loudly and flicked his pole. The other two exchanged grins and fell into an easy silence. Jay, Beau said finally, I hate to be indelicate, but why have you never told the others that you're Bry's brother? It took him a moment to compose himself. It's still a sore subject, he admitted, staring at where his line went into the water. It's something I'd rather not talk about. They'll find out sooner or later, Mick said, and then you'll have to talk about it, whether you like it or not. Jessie knows. She does? Beau said, startled. Yeah, she figured it out a while back. She's respecting my wishes to keep it quiet, just like you. How did talking to her go? We haven't had a lot of time to speak in private, but she's been good. It's been good. Talking about Bry with people who knew him last might be good, too. He shrugged. I'm not sure I'm ready to forgive him yet. Holding on to bitterness about family members, especially dead ones, never helps, Beau said quietly, as if speaking from experience. Do you have family? Jay asked. I did once, but not anymore, he said with a slight smile. It's just me and Mick. You don't have any surviving family either? Mick shook his head. My father died a couple years ago. If my mother's alive, or if I have any half-siblings, I don't know about it. So we're all orphans. No, Beau said. We're just members of a found family, that's all. But try and let go of it, Jay. He's gone now, just like my family and Mick's father, and it won't do you or his memory any favors to continue with bitterness. That being said, I understand it very well. We all have things we'd rather not talk about. And you know them all, Jay said, seeking to add a bit of levity. That's my job as captain. I need to understand the people under my command. I would never betray a confidence, though. We wouldn't ask you to, he said. Thank you. I will tell them. Although, I'm kind of amused by the fact none of them have noticed the striking similarities. I know I'm better looking, but that's no excuse. Jessie saw it. Beau laughed. Sometimes the most obvious things are those we manage not to see. Clearly. Before anything more could be said, Beau jerked as his line went taut. What? He started in shock. Jay snorted. You got something on your line. No need to panic. Reel it in. Let's see if it's worth keeping for my dinner. The other man shot him a look, but got to work reeling it in. The fish put up a serious fight, and by the time Beau pulled it above the surface, both Jay and Mick were very curious about just how large the fish had to be. When it turned out to be barely more than 6 inches long, both of them burst out laughing. Beau smiled proudly anyway. Should I keep it? Throw it back. By the time we skinned it and took the head and tail off, it wouldn't be worth it, except maybe as an appetizer, Mick said. How do I get it off the hook? Beau asked, after another minute of surveying it proudly. Jay groaned, reaching out to snag the line. He expertly pulled the fish off the hook and offered it to Beau, who held it with fascination. Have you never gone fishing before? Jay asked. Beau shrugged. It was never something I felt the urge to do. I can hunt, though, he added. So you won't starve in the wilderness. Good job. Fishing expends a lot less energy. Are you sure I can't keep it? Mick and Jay exchanged a glance. To eat or as a pet? To eat. Well, to feed Jay. It's a bass. It would taste good, Jay said, and then shrugged. Go ahead and kill it now. Beau stared at the fish with some horror. How do I do that? Give me the fish, he sighed, and quickly and expertly killed it before nudging the bait bucket back to him. Now, let's see if your beginner's luck will last long enough for me to get a full meal out of it. Beau eagerly affixed another piece of bait and tossed it back in the water, sitting forward. By the end of the afternoon, even with a lengthy break, they'd caught a small pile of fish, enough for dinner for all three of them. It was the last fish that was the trouble. Beau caught it, the biggest of the day. He pulled it, struggling out of the water, and it wiggled furiously. Although he'd managed to bring himself to kill one, he had yet to take his own fish off the hook, so Jay leaned over the water to grab it. It flapped and wiggled and smacked Jay's hand. With a yelp, he overbalanced and tumbled headfirst into the stream. Luckily, the stream there flowed wide and fairly deep, with little debris and no rocks. He stumbled to his feet in the water, which came almost to his waist, already chilled. Beau and Mick were laughing, even as Mick picked the fish off the line. He had the experience plainly, even if he'd spent all day pretending he didn't. I hate you both. We did nothing, Beau said, fighting to regain a straight face. You didn't try and catch me. It was a truly graceful somersault into the water, Mick informed him, calmly delivering the killer blow to the fish's head. If you stay in there, you're only going to get wetter. I'm not sure that's possible, Beau said. Jay eyed them both for only a second before heaving a large splash at them. Beau blinked water from his eyes, then shrugged pragmatically. I suppose we deserved that. You supposed correctly, Jay said, and promptly splashed them again. This time, Mick's eyes narrowed. Go ahead, throw your book at me, Jay said cheekily. I'll be sure to catch it and use it to dry myself off. Beau shook his head, not even bothering to cover his amusement as he stood and grabbed the blanket they'd used during lunch. Here, at least take your shirt off and wrap this around yourself. It'll dry. Jay clambered back onto dry land with a mournful look. As much as I like you, Beau, that statement would have been so much more special coming from someone not in a committed relationship. That's strangely comforting, Beau said dryly, and handed it to him as Jay peeled off his soaked shirt. Come on, I think it's time we head home. He wrung his own shirt out, then moved to collect their things. They returned a couple hours before dark, still damp. After changing into a dry set of clothes, Jay installed himself in front of the fire in the kitchen and watched with barely contained laughter as the cook showed Beau how to deskin and cook his fish. Mick also installed himself in the kitchen, helping with another part of dinner, but mostly watching Beau as well. Beau finished with a gusto, and the three joined the women for dinner, graciously allowing them to try their fish and regaling them with tales of their adventure. The sharp rap on his open door drew Sorin's attention. He wasn't too surprised to find Jackson McRose standing there. The young lieutenant had, at Annie's request, been invited back from Greensward to attend the announcement, and Sorin had suspected he'd offer a report before he returned to the slightly smaller city. Sir, Jackson said with a faint smile. Hello, Jackson. How soon are you heading back to Greensward? Tomorrow, sir, bright and early. Colonel's orders. Well, make sure you have enough time with Anika before you go. I plan on it, sir, only she's still with the king, Jackson said with a shrug. I'll catch her later. Have they returned to Wren's rooms yet? I don't believe so. Sorin nodded, not particularly surprised. They would return in due time. I suppose we should go find Vladimir, then. Would you like me to go find him and bring him here? He cocked an eyebrow at Jackson, fighting a chuckle. That was diplomatically put, but would only get you in trouble. So I'll come, he said, standing and walking out the door. Jackson fell into step beside him as they headed for Vladimir's office. When they reached it, Jackson hesitated, reaching up to rap on the door much like he had with Sorin, but Sorin ran around him and headed for the chair at his brother's desk. Vladimir caught the scuff of Jackson's feet and looked up as Sorin settled in, nice as you please, in the chair. For an instant, his expression darkened, but it was gone so quickly, anyone who didn't know him as well as Sorin might have missed it. Sorin also snuck a glance at the lieutenant, but if Jackson had caught it, he hid his reaction. General, Jackson said with a crisp salute. Lieutenant, Vladimir said, gesturing forward. Did you enjoy today's proceedings? Yes, sir, Jackson said with his very best completely neutral look. I think the people will accept Annie without hesitation. She has a way with people, after all. Sorin pursed his lips against a smile. Despite the regret he felt at helping drag Jackson into their world, the boy he'd first met had grown into a competent and smart young man. His diplomacy was also to be admired. He managed to navigate the often murky and dangerous waters around all three siblings while making friends with pretty much everyone he met. Sorin hoped that someday Jackson would find an adequate outlet for those abilities, far away from them. Vladimir merely nodded. That she does, although I can't say as I fully understand it. That's because people like her, Sorin said, almost before he made up his mind to comment. Jackson went still. His brother did too, before turning slowly to look at him. What was that? People like our sister. Wren included, he said, injecting a more mild tone this time. What do you have to report, Jackson? Colonel Rees seems very confident he'll be able to get more solid information out of the freedom fighter prisoners soon. The doctor has given him permission to begin again with Jasmine. She's healed enough that he won't break her to the point of no return. Anything else? Sorin asked. Jasmine and James were playing a game that, given enough time, Rees would win. No, it's only been a couple days since I was posted there, Jackson said with a smile. I'm sure there'll be more by the wedding. No doubt, Sorin agreed. Shouldn't be too long. Very good, Vladimir said, but his eyes were already fixed on Sorin. I am concerned about you. Jackson went still yet again. Concerned about me? Why? I'm fine. Rarely better, actually. You? He added, just because he knew it would annoy his brother. That's exactly what I mean, Vladimir said, pouncing on the words. You insist on ignoring my orders and acting downright cheerful. Is that a crime? Jackson edged slowly towards the door. If Vladimir noticed, he ignored him. Sorin suspected his brother didn't even see the young man. It is when you deliberately don't follow through on orders. It makes us weak. No, what makes us weak is when we give bad orders and force follow-through on them. Jackson bolted, and Sorin didn't blame him 1 ounce. Vladimir started to rise out of his chair. How dare! If you deferred to my better judgment, this wouldn't be an issue. We've almost stabilized the entire country, his brother bit out. Do not mess this up for us. For you. You mean, don't mess this up for you. What? Vladimir asked, voice low and dangerous, so much like Edward's that a shiver fought its way up Sorin's spine. Still, he acted as if he hadn't noticed or been bothered. I mean, this is your dream. Ruling Tira was never something Annie or I wanted. It had been Edward's dream originally, but Sorin wasn't cruel enough to bring up the man by name, even if he never understood why or when Edward had decided he wanted to be king. Vlad wasn't that far gone yet. It's all of ours, Vladimir corrected sharply. Now, yes, it sort of has to be, doesn't it? If we lose at this point, the game is over, and we'll most likely be dead or worse. Don't give me that. You helped me, Sorin, every step of the way, he snapped. I let you use me every step of the way. Vladimir finally got to his feet, looming over Sorin, who leaned back in the chair in studious unconcern. What are you talking about? He demanded. I let you use me, he repeated, making sure to enunciate each word slowly and maybe a little overly deliberately. I don't understand, Vlad said after a moment, deflating to press his palms against his desk. No, you wouldn't. Why? Why did I let you use me? Because I didn't care if I lived or died. Nothing seemed important, including doing the right thing. How could you not care? Name one thing I had to live for when I returned to that house and your plan. Annie? Me? Halfway, right? I did come back to do my best to keep Annie out of it, and if that proved impossible, to keep her alive. What about me? Vladimir asked, sounding almost hurt. You've always been able to take care of yourself, he said quietly. After all, you had cooked up the majority of this plot without me, so I willingly let you use my brain and resources. His brother pursed his lips. So what has changed? Sorin's lip curled up. The willingly part. Sorin straightened. Vladimir straightened. Sorin, he started, a threat inherent in the world. Stop acting like your goddamn father. Sorin shot at him before he could think better of it. Edward has been buried for years. The world is a better place when he stays buried. Vlad went white. I'm not my father, he bit out. Do not ruin this for any of us, Sorin. I wouldn't. I have something very invested in all of our plotting, don't I? If I ruin it for you, I ruin it for myself and my sister. Our sister. Sorin cocked an eyebrow at him and then sat forward and stood, brushing off his pants. Try not to forget that yourself. He straightened, looking Vladimir in the eye. I will do my best to make this work, for her sake. But it's about time I started telling you when your plans, ideas, or orders are stupid. So I suggest you prepare yourself for that. I'm not afraid of you. His brother pursed his lips and nodded slowly. I don't want you to be, he said after a minute. That's something, Sorin said. I have work to do. I shall see you later. He turned before Vladimir could speak again and left the room. Once he rounded a corner in the hall and was out of sight of the doorway, he slumped back against the wall and let out a long breath, closing his eyes. Vladimir was getting worse, almost by the day. Maybe it was time for a contingency plan. Chapter 28. I stopped there, taking a breath to drink some water and look at my friend. I think Jay could use his Jessie poo right now, I said, forcing a smile. He looked back at me, gaze dull but still alive. Too right, he muttered. I was surprised and very glad to see him alert and making eye contact. Hey, he managed a weak smile. Hi. Are you... I started and couldn't finish. I knew he still wasn't okay. I could see it in the tension in his shoulders and the flatness in his eyes. I will be. Dolls always bounce back, he said, but without the usual levity and bouncing that accompanied that statement. What happened? When I went into the room, there was a tub of water sitting in the center. That explained why he'd been so wet. God's breath, Stella muttered. Jay winced. When I didn't answer a question, the brutes held me under. How long? Long enough, usually until I took a breath. Then Rees would wait until I coughed it out and ask another one. He smiled crookedly. I think I officially hate water. I don't blame you. Now would probably not be a good time to offer you a sip, I said, gesturing at the dish. Actually, it sounds good, he said, leaning forward and scooping it up. It's not a very large quantity. Just don't ask me to go swimming or fishing anytime soon. I nodded. Jay loved both of those activities. I hope we could get past this, or it would be different enough it wouldn't bother him. We'll see what we can do to get you comfortable doing those when we get out, I said lightly. If, he said softly. When, I told him. We cannot let a man like Trigger Rees win. True. We need to see if we can come up with a possible plan, too, just in case Jesse and Rye can't manage it. I had a lot of faith in our friends, but I agreed that trying to figure out something of our own wasn't a bad idea. I just wasn't sure there was a way. Rees was always careful with us, always sending both brutes, and they outweighed possibly all four of us. I'm trying, but I don't see you helping. Hey, he protested before he caught sight of my expression and made a face. Better. He rolled his eyes, but I took it as a good sign. I'm sorry I can't provide you with your Jessie Poo, I said, teasing. Jay winced again. Not funny. I strongly suspect she's harboring a grudge for that and will promptly murder me upon rescuing us. If she was going to murder you, why would she bother rescuing you first? Dave asked. Astute question, young man, Jay said, pointing at him with a touch of his usual vigor. Plainly, it is my fate to die here in this... I clapped a hand over his mouth. Stop that. Don't tempt the gods. Good point, he said, muffled from my hand. I would very much desire to look upon the outside world again. You're such an idiot, I told him, taking my hand away. He smiled a little. I know. If you two are done once again picking on each other, Stella said, can I ask a couple of questions? I turned to her. Sure, about what? 2 parts of the last section. I try not to interrupt when you're so involved in the story, but since we've stopped anyway, I thought I'd ask. Go for it, Jay said, chin still on his knees, but he definitely held himself less tightly. Did the 3 not retaliate for the ambush? You seemed to be outside freely again pretty quickly after that. Oh, I did forget that part, didn't I? I said. The 3 tried to retaliate, Jay said. When the remaining soldiers got back to Oakbridge, or when news reached Oakbridge, they sent spies up into the region. Only they all went through Elworth, and our people sniffed them out. We captured the first 3 and convinced them better of snooping. Of course, that really only pissed them off more, but we got lucky because Neris tried to make inroads even further north in towns like Evanley, since the 3 have been unable to push them back to their original borders. All the available spies and soldiers were needed down at the border. We kept scouts out, but the main danger was gone. She nodded. Okay, that makes sense, and if I thought about it logically, I remember hearing about that thrust by the Narins. Sometimes it's hard to remember you're telling a true story, she said with a sheepish smile. No judgment, Jay said. I routinely used to get sucked into stories, true or imaginary, as a kid. What was the other question? I asked, but I already suspected I knew what it was. Telling us about Beau, here in this place. I mean, yes, we already knew from the conversation to McRose, but not that clearly. I shrugged. To be honest, if McRose is sending letters to Beau from the prince that Anika knows about, then I suspect that Opalyn and Dagmar probably have strong suspicions anyway about Beau as the head of the Freedom Fighters. Plus, I know none of them were around when I said it. I kept a pretty close eye on the hallway. And she lowered her voice, Dave added. That too. Stella nodded. Makes sense. Just seems a little gutsy. I grinned. Gutsy is what we do. We wouldn't be here if we weren't being gutsy. And foolhardy. And sometimes plain idiotic, I agreed, laughing. Maybe it's time to finish up the story. Yes, please, Dave said. You both just left for Greensward. My memory's not that bad, Jay said. Since I ditched Jez for the last bits, including, here he sighed dramatically, my frolicking, which she did not do justice, I'll pick up with our arrival at Greensward. He took a deep breath and launched into the last section. It took a couple of days to travel from Cavern Hall to Greensward, cutting around the outskirts of Elworth and then straight south on the road. No one looked at them twice. Their first view of Greensward, which neither had visited before, came maybe a half an hour's ride out as they crested a small rise. They reined in the horses. I am unimpressed, Jay declared. It's Tira's second biggest city, Jez said, startled by the assertion. I'm impressed. Look at it, he said. It's a total fixer-upper. I mean, those walls, honestly... The walls stood straight and solid with no signs of decay or crumbling. She rolled her eyes. I will never understand you. He grinned and nudged his horse forward. Good. They checked in at an inn, a respectable distance from the weapons depot, but close to the apartment the recruitment pair shared. To create a credible cover, they told the innkeeper they were Mr. and Mrs. Dalton and agreed not to tell Beau, although Jez thought he'd get too jealous, but just in case. The next morning, they left the inn and wound their way through the busy streets until they reached the shade of the Palace of Greensward. Now, the local Duke lived there, but stories had it that it had once been the Queen's Palace to rival the King's Castle in Oakbridge. Or, at least that's what Jay could recall. The palace was an attraction in the city, with its ornate towers and decorative stonework. The 3 had closed it to visitors, but there was still plenty to see from outside the low defensive walls, and for a while Jez and Jay strolled along, taking it all in as if they were really there to just view it and had no other reasons. Eventually, though, their walk brought them closer to the barracks and the weapons depot. Jay tore his gaze away from the palace to casually scan the area, keeping up a steady stream of boring conversation with Jez about their plans, both real and fake, since they had enough time to see the city while they were there. The area was fairly heavily guarded, considering it would go boom rather spectacularly if the right person armed with the right weapons could get at it. Additionally, it hugged the wall of the palace, snug between that and the soldiers' barracks. After Oakbridge, it was the second most heavily guarded town, which made sense, considering its size. There had been multiple riots in Greensward, mostly in the early days of the Three's occupation. The most recent had been nudged along by the recruitment team, Adam and Ursula, only about 6 months prior. "Not going to be easy," Jez murmured. "Nothing worthwhile ever is," Jay said. "Beau warned us this would be the case. I think it's more or less heavily guarded at night." "Not sure. There are certainly more soldiers on site at night, more weapons too, presumably, but most of the rest of the world is also asleep." He nodded thoughtfully. A minute later, they both turned and meandered back through the city. Throughout the next couple of days, they made multiple trips at various times to get as accurate a record as possible of when the soldiers were around. Sometimes they went alone, sometimes together, not wanting to arouse suspicion. After the reconnaissance, they sat on the bed and examined the sketches and notes they'd made. Jez pawed through them and frowned. Late morning or early afternoon seemed the lightest times, when most of the soldiers are out on duty and no one's sleeping. But even then, they've got good coverage. Whoever set up their guard duties knew what they were doing. She flipped to another page and read, "That's a local colonel, Colonel Rees. Whoever he is has knowledge and background. So if there's already good coverage, we need to mess up that coverage. How long do we estimate it'll take us to set the charges?" 15 minutes, with a couple more for getting in and out. Just tapped one of the papers as she thought. "Maybe we need to bring in Adam and Ursula. They've caused some riots here before. Maybe they can do the same for us." "It's only a few days' notice," Jay said, "but most freedom fighters are miracle workers. Come on, let's go see them now and take another stroll by the palace on our way back." Even though they had detected no signs of suspicion from the Three's men, the pair still took the long way to the apartment Adam and Ursula shared. Jay knocked and greeted Adam with a sunny smile. "Hi, we need your help." "Oh?" he asked, stepping aside to gesture them in. The 2 times they'd met with the recruitment team, it had become abundantly clear that Adam didn't know what to do with Jay, while Ursula seemed quite at home with deciphering the important things and giving him a quelling look when necessary. "Hello, you two," the woman said. "Come have a seat. Can I get you anything?" "No, thank you," Jez said, sitting. "We came to ask if you could set off another riot on a schedule in a couple of days." The pair exchanged a look Jez knew well, the kind that passed between best friends, and she suddenly missed Jessie and Rye. "Should be doable, near the depot." "The closer the better," Jay said, "so we can make things go boom!" He all but yelled the last word, and Adam jumped. Ursula shot him a nasty look. "Sorry, he's been doing that since we got here. The only time he doesn't is when we're scouting," Jez said apologetically. "But it's so fun!" Jay protested. "Boom, boom, boom." Jez slapped a hand over his mouth. "Stop it." She waited until he'd saluted before releasing him. "Thank you." She turned back to the others. "What do you think, and what can we do to help?" "Give us the rest of the day to figure things out," Adam said, even as he stood and moved over to a well-ordered desk. Ursula nodded. "Come back tomorrow for breakfast, and you don't need to do anything. This is part of our job description. Yours is to make sure that the depot goes," she paused and held up a stern figure to Jay, "up in flames." He sighed loudly. "That is not nearly as fun." "I don't care," she said, and glanced subtly over at Adam. Jez stood and pulled Jay up with her. "We'll leave you to it. Thank you. Please let us know if there's anything we can do now or the day of." "We will. We'll probably need to arrange some sort of signal for the start and when to abandon ship. We can discuss that tomorrow." Jay saluted and bounced out the door. Jez followed more sedately. They hit the late morning lull at the barracks and wandered casually by, observing everything. As soon as they were far enough away, Jay glanced at her. His grin came too late for her to stop him. Boom! The meeting the next morning was concise and to the point. Adam and Ursula were confident in their ability to start a big enough riot to entice the soldiers' attention. Ursula explained that the crackdown following the last riot had been so severe that most of the city had already been hovering at the edge of a riot again in protest of that treatment. They'd agreed that they'd head to the area together, and Adam and Ursula would start things with a simple count to 200 after Jez and Jay left them. That would give them enough time to get in a position to do their sneaking and setting of explosives once the guards were properly distracted. They set the date to be 3 mornings from then, which would put Jez and Jay right on schedule, and give them at least a week of laying low and relaxation before Jessie and Rye arrived and they got put back to work. And that assumed nothing had changed in the plan, or that nothing would change. As they headed back to their inn, Jay stuck his hands in his pockets and looked up at the sky. This still might not work. We didn't expect it to be so well guarded. No, we didn't, but we probably should have. Either way, we have to try. Oh, don't get me wrong. We are absolutely trying, he said with a slight smile. But that doesn't mean we're not screwed. What happens if we are? Nothing, at least until Jessie and Rye get here. We don't have the numbers locally to rescue us. Adam and Ursula have been here too long, and Beau, as much as he'd want us out, wouldn't risk Call's anonymity to have him help. Rye and Jessie will move mountains to get us out, though, no matter if the numbers are stacked against them or not. Exactly. Jay walked a few more paces, kicking at the stones in the road. Well, seeing the inside of the jail has never been a dream, but hey, I'm all for trying something new. Jez snorted. Let's not get ahead of ourselves. We're good at what we do. It might turn out all right. True. I am an even bigger fan of positive thinking, he said. Is there anything you're not a fan of? He tilted his head, giving the question due consideration. Probably. Things with fangs. That's your criteria. You like it unless it has fangs. Pretty much. Guess that makes you easy to please. And entertain. He opened his mouth and she nudged him hard in the ribs. Do not say it. He went into an instant pout, but didn't say it, so Jez considered it a win. The morning of the riot dawned bright but chilly, like many December days. Jez and Jay walked to the apartment to meet Ursula after breakfast, since Adam was out making sure a crowd actually showed up outside the palace. The key was to have the bulk of the protest far enough from the barracks and depot so that the soldiers dealing with the crowd couldn't easily see the area, in addition to the distraction factor it offered. Ursula was in a good mood. All indications say it'll be a big one, she told them as soon as she opened the door. Come on, let's go meet Adam. Sure enough, the recruitment team had come through. They could hear the chanting of protest from a few blocks away. When they reached it, Jez and Jay saw the group wasn't large yet. People seemed to be continually adding to the numbers. This made sense to Jay, since they didn't want any real rioting to break out until a little later in the morning. For now, the soldiers watched the chanting crowd warily from their posts. It took a few minutes to find Adam, who stood off to one side, leaning against a building, eyes trained on the crowd and the soldiers beyond them. Looks good, Ursula said. He nodded. Word's spreading. In an hour, it'll be big and primed to explode. Jay's stomach clenched. You said the last crackdown was harsh. Are we going to get a lot of people hurt or arrested for this? A troubled look skittered across Adam's face. It's hard to say, really, he said slowly. They seem to react differently each time. And if the crowd gets big enough, that should be a significant distraction without an actual riot, because they'll need to pull people here to make sure it doesn't explode. The crackdown was harsh, Ursula said, but there were no hangings or long-term arrests. Even the soldiers and their commanders realized that would be going too far. There was originally enforced nighttime curfew and some rules about how many people could gather in one space at a time, rules that really only lasted until the next market day, when they saw the impracticality of enforcing it. Although Ursula slipped off a few times to do something or another, Adam barely moved, watching the crowd carefully. Jez and Jay stayed with him, feeling his tension along with the nerves of what they were about to attempt. Each had a bag slung over one shoulder, carrying their half of the explosives. Finally, an hour crawled by, and Adam turned his attention from the crowd to nod to them seriously. I wish you the speed and luck of the gods. We'll take it, Jay said with a faint smile, and led the way around the edge of the crowd. As they moved, they yelled along with the crowd, throwing their fists up. The guards didn't even look as they broke off down a side alley and emerged 2 blocks down, near the barracks and depot. The pair looked around, dropping their pretense of being casual, and were delighted to realize the area was all but deserted. There were only 1 or 2 men talking urgently on the far side of the barracks from the depot, and they paid the 2 pedestrians no mind, especially as they were just 2 of many, most heading towards the crowd, though, and not away. Jez moved forward, scanning again, and still spotting no one. Now's our chance, she murmured, and slipped towards the depot, eyes darting to and fro, searching for signs of an ambush or anyone noticing them. No cry of alarm came as they slid out of sight. Jez pointed at herself and motioned left. Jay nodded and pointed right, heading that way at a quick trot. The act itself took very little time. They practiced the motions ahead of time back at Cavern Hall. Jez moved down the length of the depot to the far end, double-checking that Jay was opposite her, before reaching into her bag and pulling out the top device. She set the small mine-like explosive down, lit the long trigger wick, and hurried a dozen feet to set the next. She placed the last one at the corner and peeked out. There were more soldiers, but still none seemed to be looking in their directions. She suddenly wished they'd figured out a way to steal 2 uniforms, even if it seemed like the 3 employed few to no women. With loose enough uniform and only distant scrutiny, she could have passed. They couldn't delay long, though, or the explosives would go off while she was still practically on top of one. Being all but blown up once in a lifetime was more than enough for her. She caught Jay peeking out and nodded. He returned it and stepped out, hands casually finding his pockets as he strolled towards the main streets. Jez fell into step with him, linking her arm through his. They'd almost reached the stream of people when a loud, curt voice came from behind them. Hey, you 2 there! Stop! They exchanged a brief glance and sped up, aiming to blend into the crowd and escape notice, but luck wasn't with them. Before they got very far, 4 soldiers appeared in front of them, pushing their way through the crowd, presumably on the way back to the barracks. Jez yanked Jay to the side, but the yelling voice reached over the clamor, obviously in pursuit. Stop them! To their credit, the 4 soldiers reacted almost immediately. One shot at a hand and grabbed Jez's upper arm in a vice grip. In the time it took her to twist free, they'd loosely encircled the pair. What is the meaning of this? Jay asked, adopting the inflection of a nobleman. Jez didn't think the ruse would fly considering their attire, but could certainly play along. They ignored him, coming to attention as their pursuer caught up, panting. He was a captain from the look of his uniform. Sir, one of them said, saluting. Thank you, soldiers, he said, and turned to Jez and Jay, who had both adopted looks of semi-polite bafflement. What were you 2 doing so close to the barracks? That's not a public area. Jez increased her puzzled look, heart starting to race. The bombs would go off any moment, and she doubted that they would get out of this if they were still standing here when they did. We were just out for a stroll, weren't we, honey? Jay brushed a kiss on her cheek. Of course, Bunny. Jay is almost gagged, despite or perhaps but because of the situation. I'm so sorry, good sirs. We're on our honeymoon and don't know Greensward politics, I'm afraid. Our sincerest apologies. You can be quite sure it won't happen again, he said, throwing in a little bow for good measure. Now, if you'll excuse us, we have a lunch date with an old friend of my father's. With that, he tugged Jez's arm and started to step between the soldiers. Why the hurry? The captain asked. Jay half turned to face him and the depot and the barracks beyond. I just told you. In that instant, the depot blew. Jez felt the heat on her back. Whoever had created the little mines had seriously loaded them with balsic from the sheer size and volume of the explosion. Jay's eyes widened in real surprise. God's breath, he murmured. Jez turned. The building simply no longer existed, other than some fires on a few remaining bits of walls. As she saw the destruction, she wondered if part of the force of the explosion might have been because they stored balsic stone of their own there. All around them, people yelled and pointed. Come on, Jay hissed and tugged at her arm. The captain reacted at the same time, though, yelling and pointing at them. Seize them! Instantly, the 4 soldiers grabbed them by the arms, allowing no room for escape. They were good and caught, even if they had accomplished their goal. What did you do? The captain hissed, getting right in front of Jay's face. Jay tilted his head, not bothering to deny it. Boom, he said after some seemingly grave contemplation. Despite everything, Jez let out a snort of laughter. The captain recoiled and jerked another finger at him. You will pay for this insult. Insult? Don't you mean explosion? Destruction? Devastation? The captain let out an inarticulate snarl, but to Jez's surprise didn't hit him. Instead, he turned to the soldiers. Take them straight to the jail. Let the colonel know we could use his help until we have this under control. Yes, sir, the 4 chorused. A few more guards had joined them, forming a decent escort. As the captain stalked away, the men shoved the pair forward, parting the gathering crowd easily. Jez tried some experimental tugs and wiggles, but their grips were firm and there was no escaping. Not only that, but the jail was only a few blocks away from the barracks, so it seemed like all she did was blink, and they were there. Once inside, custody was transferred to the prison guards after a few cursory attempts to get their names. Then they were led down the hall to a cell at the far end of one. The rest, you know. Sir, old Bert grunted reluctantly as he stepped stiffly into the room. General Opeland wished me to inform you that he was stopping by shortly to talk to you. His whole expression went gleeful. He seems quite displeased. Sorin gave him a frosty look. Thank you, Bert. You are dismissed, he said, returning to his gaze to the paperwork. He heard Bert stomp away, counted to 20, and looked up. The doorway and the hall beyond were empty. So he did something childish. He stood and made his way to the door, peeking both ways before slipping through the halls quietly until he reached Wren's room. He didn't bother to knock and to try and hide from the guard. The man might figure out his plan soon enough, and knocked once before pushing the door open. Wren sat by the window and looked up. Hello, Sorin. Hello? Where's Annie? Am I supposed to know? He asked dryly. I thought she might have said. Some errand for your brother. Sorin nodded. That changed his plan slightly, but there was still Wren. Where do you want to go? He asked, before he could think better of it. Huh? The prince, no, king, managed brilliantly. With an oak bridge. Where do you want to go? Wren stared. This had better be worth it. I am offering you the opportunity to not only get out of your room, but get out of the castle for a while. I would take it if I were you. So, where do you want to go? He asked impatiently. He didn't know how long shortly meant, but he wanted to be out of the castle by the time his brother made it to his office. If he was going to run away, he was going to do it right. I don't know, just outside. That is singularly unhelpful. Red grabbed his crutches and stood. Are you hiding from something? He asked, amusement sparkling in his eyes. Rainier, if you don't shut up, I will either break you or just throw you out the window. He grinned. Both of them knew the threat wasn't serious. Either way, I'd get my trip outside. Sorin rolled his eyes. Let's go, he said, swinging open the door. Wren came over, much better on his crutches than last time Sorin had checked, and stepped outside, Sorin on his heels. The guard looked briefly surprised before he managed to check his expression and nod gravely at them. Sorin barely noticed, making sure Vlad wasn't anywhere in sight, before heading for the stairs. Wren fell in step with him. They were on the first floor and headed for the courtyard when the king suddenly froze. What is it now, Wren? He growled, turning. Maybe this hadn't been a decent substitute. People out there will know me. He sounded on the edge of real panic. So? They'll want to talk to me. So just lie through your teeth or tell the truth, whatever. Now stop worrying about things you can't change and let's go. You know you want to. Please. Now he's borderline begging, desperate to avoid his brother in another inevitable fight. The please startled Wren out of his panic and he caught up. You really are hiding from something. Or is it someone? He asked knowingly. I knew Annie was paying more attention than she let on, Sorin muttered. Where do you want to go? The ramparts, please. You haven't had enough of stone and stone walls. Yes, but from there I can see both the city and the farms outside. And you don't have to talk to anyone. Now who's hiding? I am not. I plan on walking back through the city, he said. I refuse to let myself chicken out. Good for you, Sorin said, leading the way across the courtyard, ignoring the stairs, and up into the guardhouse that blocked the rest of the ramparts from the castle. Ren followed more slowly due to the crutches. A smile crossed his face, an expression Sorin didn't recognize. What is it? He asked. What's what? Ren asked absently as he reached the top and directed his gaze out over Oakbridge, which sprawled, not always prettily, in front of them. The smile. Oh, I'm not sure you'd understand, he said after a moment of thought. Sounds like a challenge, Sorin said, leaning back against the wall, facing into the city he currently helped rule. The man standing beside him should have been ruling. Try me. He relaxed now that they were out of the castle. He could get lost in Oakbridge for hours if he wanted, even with a gimpy king in tow. I'm not sure I can, Ren began, leaning his hip against the wall so he could look outside or inside the walls with the turn of his head. There's freedom, real true freedom. Then there's a false sense of freedom, neither of which really fit me, but there's a third type. And being out here, being able to be out here, it hit me that I have that third type. I'm alive, and I'm here right now. Sorin knew exactly what he meant. The third type was the freedom that Sorin had had most of his life. Even in the years on his own and with Diana, he'd never been fully free of his family, of Edward and his legacy. And now he was so deeply embroiled in that, yes, this was something he and Ren had in common, even though they came from two wildly different places and lives. When the king looked at him, seeming puzzled by the silence, Sorin smiled and started moving along the ramparts again. You'd be surprised at what I understand. Maybe. Just doesn't seem like the type of freedom many have to deal with. I think you'd be surprised by that, too. I think very few people are fully free, even if they think they are. Still, I wonder what it would be like for life to be simple, to make decisions that only affect you and possibly your family, but not a whole country. It's good. It would feel downright liberating right about now, Sorin said quietly. Things had certainly been simpler when it was him, and then him and Diana. You know about Diana, he said, feeling safe to bring it up where his brother could not overhear. He wasn't entirely sure why he didn't want Vlad to know. Diana was dead, and there was no harm he could do, really, but something held him back. Although it wasn't a question, Ren still nodded. Yes, Annie told me, after you told her. He nodded. I could tell when I saw you next. There was almost pity in your eyes. Almost, the other man said, smiling slightly. Sorin let out a bark of laughter. Almost, but not quite. I would wish that on no one, Ren said quietly. To lose the people you love? There's nothing worse. Something else they had in common. He nodded, looking out over Oakbridge again, not wanting to go down that road, even with someone who understood. Finally, he said, Vladimir wants you to marry Annie soon. How soon is soon? A week. 2 tops. Short engagement, he muttered, nudging a stone with his crutch. Vladimir is insistent, and it won't really change things for you, either of you. I suppose not, he said, and shoved the stone off the edge. I didn't think that you minded the idea of marrying my sister, he said. He knew that wasn't Ren's problem, but it was worth the test. It's not Annie. I'd rather be able to do it on our own terms. And if that was the case, you wouldn't be able to marry her. Ren's lip quirked in a sideways smile. If you'd done your research, you'd remember that my family has had a habit over the centuries of marrying commoners. It still hasn't happened in a few generations. My reign isn't exactly traditional, he pointed out, very dryly. Would you marry her? He asked abruptly. If you hadn't come along, I would have married Francine de Carlin a year ago. It's not my question. I don't know, Sorin. It's hard to imagine a what-if these days. Sorin knew that answer was true, and was the only answer he'd get, so he nodded. We should probably head back. I suppose so. He grinned slightly. Are you safe from whatever chased you out here now? Shut up, Rainier, he retorted, searching out the next set of stairs down the wall and headed for them. And no, I'm going to have to face it sooner or later, but I wasn't in the mood. Ren said nothing immediately as he trailed along behind him. Then he seemed to have read into the words because he spoke. You aren't as solid as you've led me to believe. If you say so, he said, keeping his tone noncommittal, but he knew Ren wouldn't leave it alone. Annie thinks the freedom fighters are gearing up for a real assault, and that, other than the 2 prisoners in Greensward, their efforts in the past few months have all been completely successful. I fully expect it this year, probably late spring. Wait, Ren reached out and snagged his sleeve. Sorin stopped and glanced back, unable to help it. That soon? Yes, certainly within the next 6 months, but they'll have to wait at least until winter ends. They don't have the means to attack around the snow. They can't move their supplies quickly enough. How big are they now? There's no real way to tell. I know they have agents everywhere, plus probably around 500 now at their camps, if not more. We've been unable to locate their bases since Deepen's crossing, so an inaccurate account is impossible. Are you telling me you have no spies in their camp? Nope. All of our attempts to approach what we think are their recruiting teams are rebuffed with no hints given that we're even approaching the right people. Annie tried to work it for a while too, without success. Ren smiled. Good for them. "Don't make me tell you to shut up again, Rainier," he retorted, and started down the stairs, knowing Ren would be slow enough that he could ditch the king until they were on the ground. Then, hopefully people would notice him and there'd be no more talking. He stopped at the bottom and waited for Ren, wondering if he shouldn't have told the other man that. But maybe, he thought, it would preserve hope for the future, even if it wouldn't be his future.